The alien woman showed the human her deadliest beast. He asked if it was house-trained what kind of human looks at an alien woman's deadliest beast and wonders whether it belongs inside a house. And what could possibly make that the first question on his mind? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We are glad to have you here for another journey into the unknown. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching, supporting the channel, and continuing to share these adventures with us. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Now, let's begin the story. If that door opens unexpectedly, do not run, Soraya Vin said. Ethan Cole stopped beneath the last blue ceiling light and looked at the black observation window, filling the end of the corridor. Something breathed behind it. The sound was too deep to resemble any animal Ethan knew, more vibration than voice, a slow pressure that traveled through the metal floor and settled beneath his boots. The air smelled sterile near the laboratory doors, but here another scent had worked through the filtration system, warm stone mixed with damp earth and something faintly metallic. Ethan glanced at Soraya. Her sapphire blue skin caught the emergency lights in shifting violet highlights, while her golden eyes remained fixed on the glass. You usually start tours that way? He asked. This is not a tour. The visitor badge suggests otherwise. The visitor badge means security knows where to recover you. Ethan looked at the badge clipped to his gray field jacket. Comforting. Soraya did not smile. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, silver-white hair tied behind her shoulders. Every movement controlled with the careful economy Ethan had come to associate with Valori scientists. She had spent the previous hour explaining containment architecture, behavioral protocols, environmental redundancies, and exactly 14 reasons why humans underestimated unfamiliar predators. Ethan had listened to all 14. Then he had asked to see the animal. Another breath rolled through the wall. A cup of water resting on a nearby equipment cart trembled almost imperceptibly. Ethan watched the ripples. How big? Approximately 11 feet from head to tail when fully extended. Weight? Nearly 900 pounds. Ethan nodded. Diet. Soraya turned toward him. You are standing 20 feet from the most dangerous terrestrial predator on Valor. And your first concern is nutritional data? Not my first concern. What is your first concern? Ethan looked back at the dark glass. Something moved behind it. Not clearly enough to reveal shape. Only enough to interrupt a faint strip of amber habitat lighting. Does it have a name? Soraya's expression changed. Just slightly. Carrick. Ethan repeated the word quietly, testing the unfamiliar sound. Carrick. Behind the glass, the breathing stopped. Soraya went perfectly still. Ethan noticed that before he noticed anything else. Interesting, he murmured. What? It heard us. It always hears us. No. It heard that. Ethan waited. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. A soft scraping sound came from somewhere beyond the window. Not charging footsteps. Not frantic movement. Something slow. Deliberate. Soraya touched the control panel beside the glass, but did not activate it. Carrick is responsible for the highest avoidance classification of any living species on this continent. Avoidance classification? My people learned centuries ago that intelligence includes knowing what should be left alone. Ethan nodded. That part one agree with. Soraya looked at him, apparently surprised. You do? Respecting an animal means accepting that it does not exist for your convenience. Another scraping sound came through the wall, closer now. Ethan tilted his head. But fear can make people stop observing. Soraya's fingers tightened near the control panel. And curiosity can make humans stop surviving. Ethan smiled faintly. Sometimes. A heavy shape passed behind the dark glass. Ethan could feel his heartbeat now, steady but unmistakably faster. He was not fearless. Fear was information, like heat from an overloaded circuit or the smell of ozone before a transformer failed. You noticed it. You listened. You did not automatically obey it. Soraya finally touched the panel. Stay behind the marked line. Amber lights awakened beyond the window. The darkness slowly withdrew. First came black stone, then twisted silver vegetation. Then 2 enormous golden eyes opened near the ground. Ethan's smile vanished. Not from terror, from attention. The creature had been watching them the entire time. The rest of Carrick emerged so slowly that Ethan had time to understand why Soraya's people had built 3 containment systems around one animal. It unfolded from the shadows on 6 powerful legs, its body low and long beneath overlapping plates of charcoal skin that caught the amber habitat lights with a faint blue sheen. A broad head rested between heavy shoulders. 2 smaller eyes opened beneath the first pair, darker and more difficult to notice, while narrow sensory ridges along its neck shifted toward every sound in the corridor. Ethan remained behind the marked line. His heartbeat had accelerated, but his hands stayed loose at his sides. 900 pounds, he asked quietly. 892 at the last examination. You weighed it. Remotely. Smart. Carrick took one measured step forward. Its claws clicked against black stone. Soraya's posture tightened. Ethan noticed her reaction, then looked back at the animal. Carrick had stopped again. It was not staring directly at them. Its attention kept moving toward a circular device mounted high on the habitat wall. Every few seconds, the device emitted a vibration too low for Ethan to hear clearly, but he could feel it through the soles of his boots. Each pulse produced the same response. Carrick's neck ridges flattened. Its shoulders lowered. Its tail drew closer to its body. What is that unit? Ethan asked. Containment resonance generator. What does it do? Produces a frequency the species instinctively avoids. It prevents Carrick from approaching restricted sections of the habitat. Another pulse passed through the floor. Carrick moved 2 steps sideways, away from the wall. Ethan's eyes narrowed. How long has that been running? Continuously since this facility opened. And how long has Carrick lived here? 7 years. Ethan looked at Soraya. That is a long time to listen to something you hate. Her golden eyes sharpened. It is not suffering. The frequency remains within approved biological tolerance. I did not say suffering. He returned his attention to Carrick. I said it hates it. Soraya folded her arms. You have observed the animal for less than 5 minutes. Which is why I am asking questions instead of making conclusions. Carrick began pacing parallel to the glass. 11 feet of alien predator moved with surprising quiet, but each time it neared the resonance unit, its path curved away. Ethan watched 3 repetitions. Same approach, same pulse, same retreat. What makes it the deadliest predator on Valor? He asked. Soraya activated a nearby information display. Speed exceeding 40 miles per hour across short distances. Exceptional night vision. Thermal sensitivity. Complex territorial behavior. High problem-solving ability. Its species evolved without natural predators after maturity. Ethan glanced at her. That last part matters. Why? Animals that never needed to worry about being hunted can react differently when something suddenly makes them feel trapped. Soraya studied him. You believe it feels trapped? I believe I do not know yet. Ethan stepped sideways, still safely behind the line. Carrick's forward eyes followed him. He stopped. The animal stopped. Ethan moved back. Again, those golden eyes tracked him. It is curious. It is assessing you. Could be both. Humans frequently confuse dangerous attention with affection. Ethan smiled faintly. We also domesticated wolves. I have reviewed that history. It did not improve my opinion of human judgment. Ethan laughed softly. The sound made Carrick lift its head. Soraya immediately became still. Ethan did too. The animal approached the glass until only several feet separated its face from theirs. Warm condensation appeared against the transparent barrier with every breath. Up close, Ethan could see tiny silver markings around its eyes and old dust caught between the dark plates of its forehead. Carrick looked enormous, ancient, alert, yet nothing in its posture matched the mindless aggression Ethan had expected from Soraya's warnings. He watched the animal glance once more toward the humming wall device, then back toward them. Soraya? Yes. Ethan kept his eyes on Carrick. Important scientific question. Her expression became wary. What? A corner of Ethan's mouth lifted. Is it house-trained? For 3 full seconds, Soraya said nothing. Her golden eyes moved from Ethan to the 900-pound predator breathing against the glass, then back to Ethan as though deciding which creature required closer supervision. House-trained, she repeated. That is the closest translation, yes. I know what the words mean. Good. Saves time. Soraya's expression remained perfectly still. Carrick is an apex predator, not a domestic companion. Ethan watched the animal shift its weight. That was not a no. It was an extremely clear no. Another low pulse traveled from the resonance generator. Carrick's reaction was immediate. Its head lowered. The sensory ridges along its neck flattened, and it moved away from the wall before circling toward the center of the habitat. Ethan's humor faded. There. Again. Soraya followed his gaze. Normal avoidance behavior. Maybe. You disagree? I think normal can still tell you something. Ethan moved several feet along the observation glass. Carrick tracked him for a moment, but another pulse interrupted its attention. It turned toward the generator, then retreated until a stone formation blocked the device from view. Ethan stopped walking. Can you shut that thing off? Soraya looked at him sharply. No. Temporarily. Still no. 30 seconds. Ethan. 20. This is not bargaining. He nodded toward Carrick. Then call it an experiment. Soraya crossed her arms. The resonance system exists because this species does not respect conventional barriers. The glass looks conventional. The glass is 6 inches thick. Ethan gave it another look. Less conventional than I thought. Soraya almost smiled, but the expression vanished when Carrick began pacing again. Ethan counted silently. 11 steps toward the eastern wall. Pulse. Turn. 9 steps toward the rocks. Pause. Circle. Repeat. He had spent 12 years designing ecological systems for human settlements, and living systems had taught him one rule machinery never needed. Behavior always had context. A pump failed because something broke. An animal changed because something changed around it. How does Carrick behave outside captivity, he asked. The species avoids settlements. Does it pace? Not according to field records. Approach Valori? Rarely. Then why does everyone describe it as aggressive? Soraya's gaze hardened. Because close encounters are unpredictable. Unpredictable is not the same as aggressive. That distinction becomes academic when the animal weighs nearly half a ton. Size does not change the question. Ethan stepped closer to the marked line without crossing it. Carrick emerged from behind the rocks. For golden eyes found him. Ethan felt the old primitive message move through his nervous system. Large animal. Unknown animal. Keep distance. He listened to it. Distance was sensible. Panic was not. What are you seeing? Soraya asked. Its attention keeps breaking whenever that generator pulses. Because the system works. Exactly. Ethan glanced at her. But what if we have been measuring its behavior while constantly giving it something to react to? Soraya became quiet. Carrick approached the glass again, slower this time. Its breath fogged a pale oval across the barrier. Ethan did not raise his hand. He did not lean closer. He simply stood where the creature could see him. You want to remove the deterrent? Soraya said. I want to observe what happens when the room stops telling it where not to be. And if your interpretation is wrong? Ethan looked at the 6 inches of transparent material between them. Then we learn that too, safely. Soraya studied him for several seconds, then moved to the control panel. 10 seconds. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I asked for 30. You are fortunate to receive 10. She entered a command. The vibration beneath Ethan's boots disappeared. The change was so subtle that the corridor suddenly felt larger. Carrick froze. Its neck ridges lifted. For the first time, it did not retreat toward the rocks. It stood completely still and listened to the absence. The silence changed Carrick before it changed anything else. Ethan watched the enormous creature lift its head as though a pressure it had stopped noticing years ago had suddenly vanished. The sensory ridges along its neck unfolded one by one. Its shoulders rose. Even its breathing changed, slower now, each exhale leaving a pale cloud against the observation glass. Soraya kept one hand above the control panel. 8 seconds, she said. Give it the full 10. I am aware of mathematics. Carrick turned toward the wall where the resonance generator hung. Nothing came from it. The creature waited. Ethan could almost feel that waiting in his own chest. 9 seconds. 10. Soraya restored the system. The vibration returned through the floor. Carrick recoiled from the wall and moved behind the stone formation. Ethan looked at Soraya. She was already looking at him. Again, he said. No. You saw that. I saw a behavioral change following alteration of an environmental variable. That is the scientist version of yes. It is the scientist version of requiring more data. Ethan smiled. Then let us get more data. 2 hours later, Soraya was still regretting that sentence. They moved to a secondary observation room overlooking another section of the habitat. This chamber had independent controls, reinforced glass, and a floor-level viewing panel. Ethan sat cross-legged 6 feet behind it. Soraya remained standing. Why are you sitting? She asked. Makes me smaller. You are already substantially smaller than Carrick. Thank you for the confidence boost. That was not reassurance. Ethan rested his hands loosely on his knees. The resonance system in this section had been disabled under controlled conditions. No food had been placed nearby. No command signals were active. Nothing encouraged Carrick to approach. That was the point. Now what? Soraya asked. Nothing. Nothing is not an experimental procedure. Sometimes it is. 10 minutes passed. Carrick remained near the far rocks. Ethan did not call its name. He did not tap the glass. He barely moved except to shift when one leg began falling asleep. Soraya checked the time twice. Humans domesticated animals using this method? Humans domesticated animals over thousands of years. I am trying to sit quietly for 20 minutes. Your species has unusual ambitions. We get bored easily. At minute 14, Carrick emerged. Ethan noticed movement first in the reflected amber light. The creature walked toward them, stopped, then angled sideways. Its 4 eyes studied the room. Soraya became rigid. Ethan lowered his gaze slightly. Why are you looking away? She whispered. Direct staring can feel confrontational to some earth animals. Carrick is not an earth animal. No. So I am testing whether the principle travels. The creature came closer. 12 feet. 10. 8. Ethan could hear the faint click of claws against stone. His pulse quickened. He let it. Fear did not need pretending. It needed boundaries. The glass was there. Soraya was there. The animal had a choice. Carrick stopped directly opposite him. Ethan remained still. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the massive creature lowered itself onto the stone. Soraya's breath caught almost silently. Ethan glanced toward her. Has it done that before? Not near observers. Interesting. Do not sound pleased. I am sitting across from 900 pounds of alien wildlife that decided I am boring. I am delighted. Soraya slowly crouched beside him, though she kept several feet between them. Carrick's lower eyes shifted toward her. Its neck ridges tightened. Soraya immediately stopped moving. Ethan noticed. You expect something, he whispered. I respect what it can do. Good. You do not seem afraid enough. Ethan watched Carrick. I am afraid. Soraya turned toward him. You hide it well. Not hiding it. His voice remained quiet. Fear tells me to pay attention. It does not get to make every decision. Carrick's head settled onto its forelimbs. The tension along its shoulders slowly eased. Ethan looked through the glass at the creature Soraya's civilization had classified almost entirely through avoidance distances, deterrent responses, and containment behavior. Maybe it is not deciding whether we are prey, he said. Then what is it deciding? Ethan watched one golden eye close, then another. Maybe whether we are worth trusting enough to stop watching. Soraya waited until Carrick had moved back toward the silver vegetation before she stood. The moment felt strangely fragile, as though speaking too loudly might break something neither of them understood yet. Ethan rose more slowly, rubbing circulation back into one leg. 20 minutes of doing nothing, Soraya said. And somehow you consider that progress. My left foot strongly disagrees. She gave him a flat look. You joke when you are uncomfortable. Sometimes. You joked when you first saw Carrick. Ethan glanced through the glass. The creature was drinking from a shallow pool, its dark armored back reflecting amber light in soft bands. That was different. How? I was trying to make you uncomfortable. Soraya stared at him. Ethan smiled. Worked. A faint violet shimmer moved across her sapphire skin near her temples, an expression he had learned usually meant irritation. Your species has developed remarkable technology despite deeply inefficient social behavior. We contain multitudes. She turned toward the exit. The observation session is finished. Ethan followed her into the corridor. The temperature dropped several degrees when the habitat door sealed behind them, and the sterile smell of filtered air returned. For a while, only their footsteps filled the passage. You think I am wrong, Ethan said. I think you are assigning familiar Earth behavior to an organism separated from your evolutionary history by hundreds of light years. Fair criticism. Soraya slowed, apparently surprised by the answer. That is all. What did you want to debate? Humans usually defend their assumptions. So do scientists. I am a scientist. Exactly. This time she did smile, barely. Then her expression hardened again. Carrick is not a puzzle for you to solve. Ethan stopped walking. I know. Do you? Soraya faced him beneath the cold blue lights. You see an animal nobody approaches, and immediately search for a path closer. You see fear and treat it like an invitation to investigate. That may be useful on Earth. Here, curiosity without restraint is dangerous. Ethan considered her words instead of answering quickly. Somewhere behind the wall, Carrick released a low rumbling call. The sound traveled through the corridor like distant thunder. When I was 12, Ethan said, my neighbor had a rescue dog named Ranger. Big shepherd mix. Everybody on our street thought he was mean because he barked whenever anyone came near the fence. Soraya listened without interrupting. One afternoon I noticed he only barked when people reached over the fence. If they stayed on the sidewalk, he watched. If they stepped toward the gate, he backed away before barking. And you approached him? No. Ethan shook his head. I stopped approaching him. That answer seemed to catch her. For almost 2 months, I sat across the street after school. Never touched him. Never offered food. Eventually, he started lying down when he saw me. And then, eventually his owner introduced us properly. Ethan glanced toward the habitat wall. The lesson was not that every frightened animal secretly wants a human friend. The lesson was that I had been asking the wrong question. Everyone wanted to know why Ranger was threatening us. Nobody asked what we were doing that made him feel threatened. Soraya's golden eyes remained on Ethan. You believe we have done that to Carrick? I do not know. His answer came softly. But I think we owe it enough respect to find out. The resonance generator pulsed somewhere beyond the wall. Even through several layers of structure, Ethan felt the faint vibration beneath his boots. Then came the scrape of Carrick moving across stone. Soraya heard it too. Her gaze shifted toward the wall. Our containment methods have prevented incidents for decades, she said. Maybe they work. Ethan started walking again. But something can work and still teach you the wrong lesson. Soraya followed. At the end of the corridor, she stopped beside the elevator controls. Tomorrow morning. 6. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Another observation? A controlled behavioral study. Sounds suspiciously like another observation. You will follow every instruction I give. Absolutely. And you will not attempt to make Carrick your pet. Ethan considered this with exaggerated seriousness. Soraya narrowed her eyes. Ethan. Fine. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside, then looked back at her. But if it brings me a stick, all agreements are void. The doors closed on Soraya's expression somewhere between disbelief and reluctant amusement. Behind them, deep inside the habitat, Carrick settled beside the silent edge of its pool and turned all 4 golden eyes toward the corridor where the human had disappeared. For the next 11 minutes, nothing happened, and Ethan considered that the most important result they had collected. Carrick remained near the transparent wall, close enough that its slow breathing left a faint haze across the lower glass. Ethan stayed seated. Soraya stood beside the console, watching both of them with the intense concentration of someone waiting for the universe to reveal whether she had misunderstood it. You are certain you do not want to move closer? She whispered. Very. You spent yesterday trying to convince me it was curious. Curiosity is not permission. Soraya glanced at him. Ethan kept his attention loosely on Carrick without staring directly into its 4 golden eyes. If I reach toward it because I want something to happen, then the experiment becomes about me. And if nothing happens, then nothing happens. Humans are remarkably patient when attempting to prove a point. You should see us waiting for barbecue. Soraya's mouth almost curved into a smile. Carrick's neck ridges shifted toward the sound of their voices. Ethan immediately became quiet. The creature lowered its head, then moved sideways along the glass. 1 step. Another. It stopped opposite Soraya. Her posture changed so subtly that Ethan might have missed it a day earlier. Her shoulders tightened. Her fingers curled against the edge of the console. Carrick noticed too. Its lower eyes fixed on her hands. Relax your fingers, Ethan said softly. I am relaxed. Your hands disagree. Soraya slowly opened them. Carrick remained where it was. Now what? She asked. Nothing. Again. It is my best technique. Minutes passed. The laboratory ventilation whispered overhead. Somewhere beyond the habitat, morning light filtered through artificial cloud panels and painted pale silver across the black stone. Soraya finally lowered herself into the chair beside Ethan. Carrick watched the movement, but did not retreat. My instructors taught us never to allow a dangerous animal to control distance, she said. Why? Because distance is safety. Sometimes. Ethan looked toward the creature. But if every approach ends with something forcing it backward, what does it learn? Soraya was silent. That approaching us is a mistake, she finally said. Exactly. And your solution is to surrender control? No. Ethan shook his head. Keep the barrier. Keep emergency systems. Keep people safe. Just stop confusing safety with making every decision for it. Soraya studied Carrick for several seconds. Your species does this with animals on Earth? Some people do. Some do not. Humans have a complicated history with control. Yet you speak about trust as though it were measurable. It is. How? Ethan nodded toward Carrick. Yesterday it paced when we entered. Today it walked over and stayed. Soraya's golden eyes softened. That could be habituation. Sure. Or reduced resonance exposure. Also possible. Or curiosity. Now you are sounding human. She gave him a sideways look. Then Carrick moved. Not toward Ethan. Toward Soraya. The enormous creature crossed the final few feet and lowered its head near the glass directly in front of her. Soraya stopped breathing for a moment. Ethan did not speak. He watched her resist the instinct to raise her hand. Her palm remained resting on her knee. Carrick tilted its head. One golden eye focused on her. Then another. Soraya whispered, "Why is it doing that?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe it is wondering if you are house-trained." She looked at him with offended disbelief, but the tension left her shoulders. Carrick's neck ridges slowly lifted. For the first time, Soraya did not look at the creature as a problem waiting to become dangerous. She simply looked back. Ethan felt something quiet settle over the room, something more delicate than victory and more useful than courage. Nobody reached through a barrier. Nobody commanded anything. Two species remained separated by 6 inches of transparent material, and yet the distance between them had somehow become smaller because, for once, neither side had been asked to cross it. By the third morning, Soraya had stopped calling Ethan's approach irresponsible and started calling it comparative behavioral analysis, which Ethan considered an impressive scientific translation for sitting quietly near an enormous animal. They watched Carrick from the lower observation chamber, while Vaylor's pale morning light filtered through the habitat canopy. The resonance generators remained inactive except for emergency standby. Carrick no longer paced the perimeter. Instead, it explored the silver vegetation, drank from the shallow pool, and occasionally returned to inspect the 2 observers behind the glass. Humans really live with predators? Soraya asked. Ethan glanced at her. Depends what you mean by predator. Species biologically equipped to hunt other animals. Then yes. Dogs. Cats. Cats. Small ones, mostly. Mostly. Ethan smiled. Do not research Florida until I explain context. Soraya narrowed her golden eyes. Your planet becomes less reasonable every time you describe it. We like variety. Carrick approached the glass and settled several feet away. Soraya watched it with an expression Ethan had not seen during their first meeting. The caution remained, but something warmer had joined it. Curiosity. Why would humans invite another species into their homes? She asked. That is a very long story. We have time. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Some relationships started because both sides benefited. Protection, food, pest control. Companionship came later in some cases. So domestication was transactional. Sometimes. But relationships change. He nodded toward Carrick. Eventually, you stop asking what something can do for you and start caring whether it is comfortable sleeping near the heater. Soraya looked genuinely puzzled. Your predators sleep beside heating equipment? My sister's dog has a heated bed. Naturally. He has standards. Soraya looked through the glass again. Valori culture developed differently. Dangerous wildlife was given territory. Civilization remained outside it. That is not necessarily wrong. You keep saying that. Because I am not trying to prove humans figured everything out. Ethan's voice softened. We did not. We have harmed ecosystems by assuming everything should adapt to us. But sometimes we did something else. We watched. We wondered. We learned how another creature experienced the world. Soraya folded her hands in her lap. Why? Ethan considered the question. Because humans are curious. That cannot be the entire explanation. No. He watched Carrick breathe against the glass. Sometimes loneliness probably helped. Soraya turned toward him. Ethan shrugged. Imagine ancient humans sitting beside a fire. Darkness outside. Cold weather. Everything uncertain. Then some animal starts hanging around the edge of the light. Maybe the first thought is danger. Maybe the second is whether it will come closer tomorrow. And eventually you invite it inside. Eventually somebody always makes a questionable decision. A quiet sound escaped Soraya, almost a laugh. Carrick's sensory ridges lifted toward it. The creature rose and walked closer. Soraya remained still. There is something deeply strange about your species, she said. We have been told. You encounter danger and ask whether it can become familiar. Ethan shook his head. Not exactly. He looked at her, then at Carrick. Familiarity is not the goal. Understanding is. Soraya's expression became thoughtful. And if understanding reveals that something remains dangerous, then you respect the danger. You do not conquer it. Why would we need to? Ethan asked. Knowing where the boundary is can be enough. Carrick lowered itself near the barrier, closer than before, but Ethan did not move toward it. Soraya watched him. You still want to touch it? Absolutely. Yet you do not. Wanting something does not give me the right to take the choice away. Silence settled between them. Beyond the glass, Carrick rested its enormous head against the stone. Soraya slowly relaxed beside Ethan. For the first time, he realized she was no longer watching him to make sure the human behaved safely. She was watching him because she was trying to understand the same thing he was trying to understand about Carrick. Why a creature capable of crossing the distance sometimes became most interesting when it chose not to. The first contact happened because Ethan finally stopped expecting it. By late afternoon, Soraya had transferred their observation session to a controlled service alcove adjoining the habitat, separated from Carrick by a transparent partition and a narrow exchange opening normally used for remote medical equipment. The opening was barely 12 inches wide, far too small for the creature to cross, but large enough for sensors to operate without glass interference. Ethan sat several feet away while Soraya monitored every reading. No reaching through, she said. You have mentioned that 4 times. I know your species. You met me 3 days ago. It has been educational. Carrick rested near the pool until the artificial sunlight dimmed toward evening. Then it rose and approached. Ethan felt his pulse accelerate as the enormous animal crossed the habitat. No resonance vibration interrupted it. No command signal redirected it. Carrick simply walked where it wanted. It stopped opposite the exchange opening. Warm air carrying the scent of damp stone moved into the alcove. Ethan remained seated. Soraya watched the thermal display. Heart rate elevated. She whispered, "Mine or his?" "Yours." "Good to know the equipment works." Carrick lowered its head. Its sensory ridges opened like dark leaves catching invisible currents. Ethan could hear its breathing without microphones now. Slow. Heavy. Close. He rested one hand palm down on his knee. He wanted to lift it. Every curious instinct in him suggested one harmless movement forward. He did not move. "Why are you waiting?" Soraya asked quietly. "Because it knows where I am." "You believe it understands the opening?" "I believe it has eyes." One of Carrick's lower eyes focused on Ethan's hand. The creature leaned nearer. Ethan felt Soraya become perfectly still beside him. Carrick extended its broad forehead toward the opening, stopping several inches beyond the barrier. Ethan's hand remained where it was. Then something unexpected happened. The animal moved again, not toward Ethan's fingers, but toward the edge of his knee, bringing one smooth section of its armored brow within reach. Ethan looked at Soraya. Her golden eyes were wide. "Do not ask me," she whispered. "I was not going to." "You looked at me. I was checking whether you were breathing." "Barely." Ethan slowly turned his palm upward, but did not extend it. Carrick watched. Seconds passed. Then the creature closed the remaining distance itself. Warm, textured skin touched Ethan's fingertips. He forgot every joke he had prepared. The contact lasted perhaps 2 seconds, maybe 3. Carrick withdrew immediately afterward and remained nearby. Ethan let out a breath. Soraya stared at his hand as if it had just rewritten a scientific textbook. "You touched it," she said. "Technically, it touched me. That distinction matters to you." "A lot." Ethan lowered his hand again. "I did not make the decision." Soraya looked through the opening at Carrick. The animal settled onto the stone, apparently satisfied with whatever information it had gathered. "For generations," she said softly, "we described this species as intolerant of proximity." Ethan considered the words. Maybe it is intolerant of proximity it cannot control. Soraya's expression shifted. The idea seemed to land somewhere deeper than scientific curiosity. She looked at the containment walls, the generators, the marked zones, the systems designed around, keeping Carrick exactly where Valori researchers wanted it. We thought giving it distance was respect. Maybe it was, at first. Ethan looked at the creature resting nearby. But there is a difference between giving distance and enforcing it forever. Soraya sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. The habitat lights faded into deep violet, catching silver along Carrick's dark armor and blue along Soraya's skin. Ethan felt the warmth of that brief contact lingering in his fingertips. He had imagined this moment as proof that humans could approach what others feared. Instead, it felt like proof of something quieter. The remarkable thing was not that he had been brave enough to touch Valor's deadliest animal. He had not touched it at all. He had simply left his hand where Carrick could choose to find it. The lights went out at exactly 7 minutes past midnight, and Carrick knew something was wrong before Ethan did. One moment, the habitat glowed beneath its artificial violet moon, quiet except for filtered water and the steady breathing of the enormous creature near the pool. The next moment, every light vanished. Darkness swallowed the observation alcove. Ethan heard Soraya inhale sharply beside him. Then emergency strips ignited along the floor in pale red. Backup power, Ethan said. It should have engaged immediately. Soraya was already at the console. The display flickered twice before filling with warning symbols. Primary habitat control is offline. Secondary systems are attempting synchronization. A vibration suddenly rolled beneath Ethan's boots. He recognized it instantly. The resonance generators. Except this time the pulse was stronger. Much stronger. Carrick rose in the darkness. Its silhouette crossed the dim emergency light, 6 legs carrying its massive body away from the wall. Another pulse came. The creature changed direction. Soraya, I see it. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. Emergency containment automatically increased deterrent output. Can you shut it down? The command is not responding. Another pulse. Carrick moved toward the rocks, but a second generator activated from that side. The animal stopped between the 2 frequencies. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. This was not aggression. He had watched enough now to recognize the pattern. Carrick was searching for somewhere the sound did not follow. It has nowhere to go, he said. Soraya's golden eyes reflected the warning display. Emergency protocol assumes an uncontrolled animal will seek an exit, but every direction is being blocked. That is the purpose. That is the problem. A calm, automated voice filled the chamber, announcing containment stabilization. Ethan almost laughed at the phrase. Nothing beyond the glass looked stable. Carrick crossed toward the pool, stopped, turned, then moved again. Its neck ridges remained flattened. Its breathing had become faster. The thermal monitor climbed. The system thinks more movement means more danger, Ethan said. So it increases output. Soraya stared at the readings. Which creates more movement? Exactly. The generator pulsed again. Ethan could feel the pressure in his teeth now. If it was uncomfortable through insulated walls, he could only imagine what Carrick sensed inside. Soraya opened a maintenance channel. Central control, this is Dr. Vin. Suspend automated deterrence in Habitat 4. Static answered. Communications are rerouting, she said. How long? Unknown. Ethan looked at the habitat schematic glowing across the console. There had to be a section beyond the overlapping resonance fields. His eyes found a narrow service corridor connecting the main enclosure to the older northern habitat. What is this? Soraya followed his finger. Original acclimation chamber. It has been in use for years. Does it have generators? No. The corridor was sealed after the current system was installed. Can it be opened locally? Soraya understood immediately. You want to give Carrick somewhere to retreat. I want to give it one direction that does not punish it for moving. She hesitated. Opening that corridor violates emergency containment procedure. Ethan looked through the glass. Carrick had stopped moving entirely now. It stood beneath the red light, surrounded by invisible pressure from every side. Your procedure was written under the assumption that movement means aggression. Soraya said nothing. We know better now. Another pulse traveled through the floor. Soraya closed her eyes for half a second. When they opened, the hesitation was gone. Local access is 30 yards down the service passage. Ethan stood. Show me. They moved quickly through the dim corridor, emergency lights painting Soraya's sapphire skin in alternating red and shadow. Behind the wall, Carrick's footsteps echoed against stone. At the manual access panel, Soraya entered her authorization. Nothing happened. Mechanical release, Ethan said. Below the panel, she removed the cover. Ethan crouched beside her and found the old lever buried behind cables. This might trigger a security alert. It definitely will, Soraya replied. Ethan wrapped his hand around the lever. Nice to know some things are predictable. Together they pulled. Somewhere beyond the wall, a heavy door began sliding open. Cold habitat air rushed through the newly revealed passage. For one suspended moment, Carrick did not move. Ethan watched through the narrow inspection window. No command called the creature. No signal forced it forward. There was simply an open path where, seconds earlier, there had been none. Carrick lifted its head. Then it turned toward the quiet corridor. For several seconds, Carrick only stared into the open corridor. Ethan could see the animal through the narrow inspection window, its 4 golden eyes reflecting the red emergency lights, while its sensory ridges slowly lifted. Behind it, another resonance pulse moved through the habitat. Carrick flinched, but this time it did not begin pacing. It looked toward the quiet passage again. "Come on," Ethan whispered. Soraya glanced at him. "I thought you did not believe in telling it what to do." "I am encouraging from a legally irrelevant distance." Despite everything, the corner of her mouth moved. Then Carrick took one step toward the opening. Another followed. The creature paused at the threshold, testing the unfamiliar air. Ethan could hear its breathing through the service wall. Slow, careful. Nothing about the movement resembled the uncontrolled behavior predicted by the emergency system. Carrick was evaluating, choosing. "It knows the corridor is different," Soraya said. "No resonance field. No pressure telling it where it cannot go," Ethan replied. Carrick crossed the threshold. Its dark, armored body disappeared gradually into the older habitat until only the end of its long tail remained visible. Then that vanished too. Soraya immediately checked the thermal display. Heart rate decreasing. Ethan exhaled. He had not realized how tightly he had been holding his shoulders. How much? 11% already. The emergency system continued pulsing uselessly inside the empty main enclosure. Ethan looked at the warning indicators. "Your containment system successfully contained absolutely nothing. This is not the moment." I coped through sarcasm. I had noticed. A communication channel suddenly cleared with a burst of static. A stern voice filled the corridor. "Dr. Van, unauthorized habitat access has been detected. Restore northern barrier immediately." Soraya straightened. "Negative. Carrick entered voluntarily and is stabilizing. Emergency protocol requires primary containment." Primary containment caused the behavioral escalation. Silence followed. Ethan could almost hear the institutional disbelief traveling across the channel. "Restore the barrier," the voice repeated. Soraya looked through the inspection window. In the older habitat, Carrick had settled beneath a broad stone shelf. Its breathing was visibly slower. No pacing, no searching, no repeated turns. Ethan said nothing. This choice belonged to her now. Soraya's hand hovered over the controls. "Dr. Van," the voice said again. "Confirm compliance." Her golden eyes remained fixed on Carrick. "I cannot confirm a procedure contradicted by current evidence." Ethan turned toward her. The answer was quiet, but something had changed in Soraya's posture. She was no longer defending a human experiment. She was defending what she had observed herself. "Your authorization may be suspended." Then suspended. Ethan raised his eyebrows. Soraya ignored him. "The animal is calm. The northern habitat is secure. I will not force it back into an environment producing measurable distress merely because the procedure assumes its movement is hostile." The channel went silent again. Ethan leaned slightly toward her. "Remind me never to argue with you over parking." "What is parking?" "A human ritual involving territory, frustration, and painted lines." Then Carrick would understand it. Ethan laughed softly. From beyond the wall came a low rumble. Not the restless sound they had heard during resonance exposure. This one was deeper and slower. Soraya checked the monitor. No stress increase. Ethan looked through the window. Carrick had lifted its head toward their voices. "Maybe that sound means something else. We have always classified it as a warning vocalization." "Based on what?" Soraya opened her mouth, then stopped. Ethan saw the answer arrive before she spoke it. "Based on observations made under containment conditions." He nodded. "There it is." Soraya stared at the animal for a long moment. How many things have we named incorrectly because we only observed them while they were afraid? Ethan did not have a joke for that. The question felt larger than Carrick, larger than the habitat, perhaps larger than either species standing in the dim corridor. He looked at the open passage they had created, probably more than we would like to admit. Carrick lowered its head again and closed two of its eyes. Then the other two followed. Valor's deadliest predator had been given an open door, and instead of becoming more dangerous, it had finally gone somewhere quiet enough to sleep. Morning arrived before the argument did. By the time pale silver light spread across the northern habitat, Carrick had slept for nearly 4 uninterrupted hours, longer than any continuous rest period in 7 years of facility records. Ethan stood beside Soraya at the observation window while administrators filled the communication display with formal objections, procedural warnings, and increasingly creative ways of saying that nobody enjoyed discovering an old policy might be wrong. Soraya listened without interrupting. Carrick remained beneath the stone shelf, breathing slowly. Dr. Van, the senior administrator said, your evidence represents less than 4 days of modified observation. Correct. Then restoring standard containment is the responsible action. Soraya's golden eyes stayed on the sleeping animal. Standard containment produced the behavior we classified as justification for standard containment. Silence followed. Ethan looked sideways at her. That was good. Do not encourage me. The administrator continued. The resonance system has protected personnel for decades. Then preserve it for emergencies, Soraya replied. But continuous activation is no longer scientifically defensible. Ethan heard something in her voice that had not been there when they first entered the habitat corridor. She was not borrowing his argument anymore. She owned it. The discussion lasted another 20 minutes. Soraya presented thermal records, pacing frequency, resting duration, environmental correlations, and Carrick's voluntary movement into the northern habitat. Ethan spoke only when asked about system design. He explained that safety did not require constant pressure when physical barriers, remote monitoring, and controlled pathways could provide layered protection. Nobody proposed trust as a replacement for engineering. Trust was simply being allowed to exist inside it. Finally, the administrator authorized a 72-hour trial. The resonance generators would remain inactive unless specific emergency conditions were detected. Soraya closed the channel. 72 hours, Ethan said. That sounds suspiciously like progress. It sounds like paperwork. On Earth, those are occasionally the same thing. She turned toward the habitat. Carrick was awake now. It stretched its 6 legs, crossed toward the old pool, and drank without pacing once. Soraya watched in silence. I spent 7 years studying this animal, she said. You spent 3 days asking inconvenient questions. I have professional experience being inconvenient. That is not what bothers me. Ethan waited. I thought knowledge meant reducing uncertainty, she continued. Measure enough variables. Build enough safeguards. Remove enough risk. Her sapphire skin caught the morning light, turning almost violet around her temples. But we removed so much uncertainty that Carrick never had a choice left to make. Ethan leaned against the console. Humans do that too. You keep refusing opportunities to claim superiority. Terrible habit. Then what makes your approach different? Ethan looked through the glass. Carrick had noticed them. The creature began walking toward the observation area, unhurried and free to turn away whenever it wanted. Maybe nothing uniquely human, he said. Maybe we are just unusually curious about what happens after fear. Carrick stopped near the service opening. Soraya slowly sat in the same chair Ethan had used days earlier. She placed one hand palm upward on her knee. She did not extend it. Ethan noticed and said nothing. Carrick's 4 eyes settled on her. Seconds passed. The creature leaned forward, sensory ridges opening toward her scent and movement. Soraya remained still. Then Carrick brought its broad forehead through the safe opening and gently closed the distance itself. Warm dark skin rested against her fingertips. Soraya's breath caught. Her golden eyes widened, but her hand did not chase the contact. She let Carrick decide how long it lasted. When the creature withdrew, she looked down at her fingers. It chose me. Ethan smiled. Looks that way. After everything we did to keep it away. Maybe trust does not begin when somebody forgets the past. His voice softened. Maybe it begins when they notice you finally changed what you were doing. Soraya looked at him for a long moment, then back toward Carrick. Outside, Valor's morning light spread across black stone and silver leaves. Nothing had been conquered. Nothing had been tamed. Yet somehow, in the quiet space created by one open door and one unanswered choice, three very different creatures had learned how to stand closer without asking any of them to become smaller. 3 weeks later, the first thing Ethan noticed was the silence. The resonance generators were still mounted along the habitat walls, but they had not operated continuously since the 72-hour trial became a permanent protocol. Without their vibration beneath his boots, the conservation wing felt less like a machine containing nature and more like a place where something living happened to reside. He found Soraya in the redesigned observation garden, standing beneath silver-leaf branches while morning light poured through the transparent ceiling. Beyond the reinforced boundary, Carrick rested beside the pool with all 6 legs folded beneath its enormous body. "You changed the furniture," Ethan said. Soraya turned. "We changed the habitat. That sounds more scientific." "It is more scientific." New passages connected the northern and southern areas, allowing Carrick to choose between shade, open stone, water, elevated ground, and several secluded resting spaces. Monitoring systems remained everywhere, but the invisible pressure directing every movement was gone. Ethan studied the creature. "How is our terrifying menace?" "Sleeping 14% more. Pacing has decreased by 81%. Feeding interruptions are nearly absent. So lazy, relaxed, and hungry." That is an offensively inaccurate summary of excellent data. Ethan smiled. Carrick opened 2 golden eyes. Then the other 2. Its sensory ridges lifted toward his voice. It rose and approached the boundary at an easy pace. Ethan stayed where he was. "Some habits were worth keeping." "It remembers you," Soraya said. "Or it remembers that I am incredibly interesting. Your confidence remains unsupported by evidence." Carrick stopped near them and lowered itself beside the barrier. Ethan looked at Soraya. "You know, I think I deserve partial credit." "For what?" "Successful house training." Soraya stared at him. "You were wrong." Ethan placed a hand against his chest. "That hurts. Carrick is not house-trained. I noticed. Still refuses to fetch." "Ethan." "Yes." Soraya looked toward the animal, then across the open habitat. Something quietly amused entered her golden eyes. "We were." Ethan's smile faded, not because the joke had failed, but because he understood what she meant. For generations, the Valori had built stronger barriers, louder deterrents, stricter procedures, and more precise definitions around a creature they believed they already understood. Carrick had not suddenly become gentle. It had not surrendered its instincts. It had not become smaller so civilization could feel larger. The people studying it had simply learned to stop treating every unknown movement as a threat. Ethan looked through the transparent boundary. Carrick was still Valor's apex predator. Respecting that fact was part of respecting the animal itself. Yet danger had never been the whole story. Soraya stepped beside Ethan until their shoulders nearly aligned. "The council approved the new behavioral framework for 3 additional preserves," she said. "Based on 4 days of inconvenient questions?" "Based on evidence." "Of course. Your contribution is mentioned." Ethan brightened. "By name." "Unfortunately." "I will take it." Carrick released the low rumbling sound they had once classified as a warning. Soraya checked no monitor this time. She simply listened. Ethan felt the vibration through the quiet air, softer than he remembered. "We still do not know what that means," she said. "No. Does that bother you?" Ethan watched sunlight slide across Carrick's charcoal armor and scatter blue along Soraya's sapphire skin. "Not really." Her eyes shifted toward him. "Why?" He considered the question. 3 weeks earlier, he might have answered with a joke. Now the silence deserved something better. "Because not knowing gives us a reason to keep listening." Soraya looked back toward Carrick. The creature closed its eyes, apparently satisfied with their presence. No alarm sounded. No barrier moved. No one reached forward demanding proof of trust. Ethan stood beneath an alien sky beside a woman who had once shown him her world's deadliest beast, expecting him to understand fear. Instead, they had both learned something quieter. Courage was not always walking closer. Sometimes it was leaving enough space for another living thing to choose the distance. And in the warm morning silence of Valor, that choice was enough.